video number 2. Hopefully you've worked on all those activities. We'll mark them when we come back together on Thursday when I'm back. Next aspect of this dot point is the Battle of Stalingrad. And I'm going to speed through this semi-quickly, just because Jocelyn's woken up and I'm really running out of time. So, the Battle of Stalingrad is widely regarded as one of the bloodiest military engagements in history. Although it is difficult to obtain accurate figures, for many reasons, including the Soviet Union didn't like giving that sort of stuff up. Lots of people were blown up and disappeared. Fascists ended up losing, so how do you kind of keep accurate tracks when they're full of propaganda and then running away? It is estimated that between June 42 and February 1943, so just in 8 months' time, around one little city, the combined German and Soviet losses were 1.5 million dead and wounded. Okay, plus 1 million Leningraders dead by the end of the siege. Sorry, that should say Stalingraders. By the end of the siege. Okay, so in just that 8 months. Remember that figure when we go over to what the English are doing in North Africa and they're saying, oh, we won the war, this is huge, look at what a sacrifice. And then just remember the Eastern Front. So anyone that says that the Allies won World War II, you should just point them in this direction and say, well, yeah, but only because they were there at the end. The Soviet Union won World War II. Anyway, controversial. German strategy. And this was named Operation Blue at this part, when they redirected their idea, was now to head to the south of Kiev, capture the Caucasus oil fields, and take Stalingrad. The Red Army was absolutely exhausted, and its best units remained in position at Moscow, as Stalin believed this was Germany's main target. This drive split the German forces between Stalingrad and the oil fields, which showed an underestimation of the Soviets. So they thought they could still take Stalingrad by splitting their forces. The German drive slowed in late September and October as resistance by Russian defenders and local forces, for example the Chechens, stiffened. The German front was now 800 kilometres long and the supply lines were more than 2,000 kilometres away. The German front, that being how far they were trying to attack forward. Right, 800 kilometres. Now, the Battle for Stalingrad involved 3 phases. Okay, phase number 1, the German forces almost surround the city. So they absolutely surround and think, all right, gotcha. The second phase was the attack on the city itself, which began in September of 42, with massive bombing raids that reduced 80% of the city to rubble. 80%. 4 out of 5 buildings were razed to the ground. And part of the second phase was also bloody house-to-house fighting. Think of that kind of guerrilla warfare, going from place to place, going in, shooting, attacking, fighting back. And so Stalin responded to this bloody raid on Stalingrad with a special order 227. And this is huge. This kind of links back into the idea of why did it fail, role of Stalin. He declared that no Soviet soldier was permitted to take a single step back, and that order was enforced with the threat of immediate execution. You kind of see this in a similar way to the Kronstadt rebellion. Remember when we looked at Russia and all the Trotsky's defense that went in to bring down that rebellion, and then the secret police following behind them, taking their families hostages and threatening to shoot them if they refused to bring down this rebellion. So you can kind of see this is not a new thing for Stalin, but basically, if you were a Soviet soldier and you wanted to retreat, the person next to you was more than happy and more than welcome to shoot you. Nevertheless, even though they were not permitted to take a single step back, by November 1942, the Germans controlled 90% of the city. Here's a picture of showing the kind of warfare, the conditions. Imagine trying to dig a trench in that. Outrageous. All right. And then the third phase, and this is where they counterattacked. Okay. The Soviet commander, Georgy Zhukov, began to lay a trap by building up his forces in the north and south of the city. Now, their counterattack began on the 19th of November 1942, first in the north and then in the south. About 250,000 troops under German General Friedrich von Paulus were trapped inside the Stalingrad pocket, basically surrounding them. The German General Staff, the High Command of the Combined German Military, immediately recommended a planned breakout, but Hitler refused to listen, insisting that the Germans stay. Again, Hitler overriding a German military general to the detriment of the German army. So instead of bailing when they had a chance, and Hitler saying, no, you have to stay there and fight, by February 2nd, 1943, von Paulus, who was trapped and surrounded in this phase of the battle, surrendered with 200,000 troops still within the city walls. In the end, 90,000 German troops were captured, and they faced a brutal captivity where only 6,000 survived the war. And you know where they went? They went off to their gulags, and we talk about the idea of killing off prisoners in Nazi Germany. 6,000 out of 200,000 who would have surrendered, only 6,000 survived that war. It was horrendous. Despite desperate to correct the humiliation of Stalingrad, Hitler planned an attack at Kursk through Operation Citadel. This led to another crushing defeat for Hitler and will be remembered as one of the greatest tank battles in history, with about 1,500 tanks on either side. On the 5th of July 1943, 1 million soldiers and tanks attacked the Russian-held position at Kursk. The Russians were fully prepared for the attack, and the Germans were unable to gain any air superiority and were defeated within 7 days. Losses on both sides were colossal, but the Red Army could make up its losses because they were in their country with millions of people still living around them. The Wehrmacht, who were so far away from home, could not. German defeat at Stalingrad and Kursk put an end to any hope of victory against the Soviet Union. And you might think about, well, how do they go from... Where were we up to for this? Here. How do we go from this to them holding off? And the answer was industrialization. The United States eventually started helping out the Soviet Union with manufacturing. They were delivering a whole lot of necessary war goods. The Soviet Union still had their industry working so hard in the background, so they were able to mass produce. The further the war got on, the better they got at it, the more money they had, the more money that the US could bring in, and the ability to replace their air force and their tanks and their men, because they had it all set up well out of the way of the German advance, meant that in those years that they managed to hold them off, between 42 and 44, those 2-year period, it gave them the chance to replenish, restock, and hold them off for as long as they could. And by the time we have your attempted invasion of Kursk, they had rebuilt everything up to the point where now the very exhausted and depleted Germans ran out of steam. They could not come against this industrialized version of the Soviet Union that only 3 years before had been absolutely cooked by them. Mostly because the Germans had to fight so far to get anywhere significant, and that took time, that took men, that took resources, and that's something the Soviet Union could withstand, but the Germans not so much. All right, activities. Again, this is your homework now. You won't have time in class. We don't have class till Thursday, so that gives you a good 3 days to work on this. In your own words, describe the Battle of Stalingrad. What would have happened to the 90,000 soldiers who were captured? Why did only 6,000 survive? Draw upon your knowledge of how the Soviet Union treated their political prisoners, how the communists and the gulags worked, the idea of Stalin looking after them, how ridiculous that sounds, all that kind of stuff. Use your knowledge. And then source A, produced in the context of the bloody fighting for Stalingrad. Describe the cartoon. Okay, so tell me exactly what's going on here. Explain the message of the cartoon in about 250 word response, discussing the cartoon's motive, likely audience, and accuracy for depicting what happened at Stalingrad. So this is from 1943. It's Soviet propaganda, and it's claiming to depict Hitler sending troops into the Soviet Union. Hitler, troops, swastikas, crosses. Okay, it's not too deep. So, what was the motive behind the Soviets producing this? Who were the audience that they were most likely showing it to? And just how accurate was it? Okay. We'll cover the significance of the campaign on Thursday. All right, so this is homework. Please have it done. I trust that you will do it for me because we're going to go through it right at the start of our Thursday period. All right, thank you. Good luck.